Okay. Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be back with you again. We are making our way through James. We only have a couple more weeks before we shift our focus to the letters of Peter. Let me get my screen. There we go. I'm pinned. But we've already talked about some of the controversial topics that is covered in James. Today, we're going to speak a little bit lighter than what we've had the last 2 weeks. It's not so hot buttony kind of debatable content here. Nevertheless, let's get started with a prayer and dive right in. Okay. If we have our prayers for enlightenment, let's pray along. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. Shine within my heart, loving Master, the pure light of your divine knowledge, and open the eyes of my mind that I may understand your teachings. Instill in me also a reverence for your blessed commandments, so that having conquered sinful desires, I may pursue a spiritual way of life, thinking and doing all those things that are pleasing to you. For you, Christ my God, are my light, and to you I give glory, together with your Father and your Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen. Okay. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Nespina, welcome. We've been talking about the Universal Letter of St. James. St. James is one of the apostles, but not one of the 12. He was one of the 70. He was one of the greater followers of Christ, not the immediate 12 that we know in the gospel passages. He's known as the brother of the Lord. And so he wasn't St. James the Greater, the brother of John, the son of Zebedee. He wasn't St. James, son of Alphaeus, who was St. James the Lesser in the 12. He's a different James. This St. James was the first bishop of Jerusalem. He was the first leader of the home church, right? The Grand Central, like this is the command central of the infant growing Christian community, and so he was the leader of it, and he was appointed to that by Peter and John, two of the 12, the inner circle, and so this letter was most likely a homily, a sermon that he was giving, that was being recorded by somebody and transcribed by somebody, and then perhaps like expanded on and expounded upon and clarified and elaborated on, and then distributed to the church at large, specifically the Jewish Christian diaspora that had spread outside Jerusalem. So all the Christians who were no longer living in Jerusalem, as just kind of like guidelines for Christian living and how to receive this faith and be cognizant of, okay, we've been baptized and given this great grace of salvation, but we also have to lead lives with like fitting conduct as well, you know. And so we talked about that extensively last week with the famous works versus faith debate that a lot of scholars have between him and where they've invented this conflict between he and Paul, which we saw wasn't really a thing, but really just talking about two sides of the same coin. And now today we're going to talk about chapter 3. All right. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in. All right. Let's get started here with chapter 3, verse 1. We're looking in the Orthodox Study Bible. If you've got the version that I have, we're on page 1677. 1677. James 3. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, you're getting closer in Matthew. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, keep going. It's after the Pauline letters, so after Acts, after everything. Here you got it. 16.
After Romans?
After Romans. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah. It's one of the. Here we go. We're getting close. We're getting close.
okay,
6. Oh, we're probably 30 pages away now.
okay.
Getting in there. You're
After
getting.
Hebrews?
Yep.
Oh,
You're almost. No,
after,
no, back up. Back
okay,
up.
sorry.
You're good. Yeah, it's the next one. Let's see
Okay.
here. 16. Yep, right here. Last page.
It's way
You got it?
down. Yeah,
All
okay.
right. So chapter 3, verse 1. Okay, good. All right, chapter 3, verse 1. And again, like the previous weeks, we're going to take it pretty slow and methodically at first. So, verse 1. My brethren, Let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. Yikes. That's me. So it's not nice. It's not nice. It's not nice. It's this verse that keeps me up at night. um, teachers were critical in the early church. They're critical today, but in the early church, they were critical for sure. The apostles, the prophets, they were always on the move, right? So the Jewish prophets were wandering kind of teacher folk, right? And the apostles just continued their tradition. They kept doing the thing that they had seen modeled in their life as Jewish men. Now they're doing that as Christian men. So they are now no longer called prophets; they're called apostles. Well, the apostles never stayed in one spot for very long. They were church planters. They were preaching the gospel, planting seeds, and then from there, we'd have lots of people being converted and coming to the faith. They would then see those who are more advanced in that community, the homegrown people in that community that they had just established, and say, all right, you're the teacher here long term. I'm getting ready to go. You stay, right? And so they would be planted there where they would say, all right, you are now, well, I'm going to travel around all of these churches in the Mediterranean area. This is your mission. Your mission is to stay in this one and make sure that it's nurtured and on the right path. You be the teacher of these people. I'm the apostle of many people, right? So because of that, they were given great respect. They were held kind of in the same view as the apostles. And we see it in the scriptures, right? That it was the teachers in the church of Antioch that we read in Acts chapter 13, verse 1, where they sent Paul and Barnabas to go out on that first mission. When Paul was in Antioch and he had just been baptized by Ananias, he had just received his sight again. He is now a Christian and he's teaching in Antioch for years, right? The teachers of the church of Antioch said, you know what? We've got this covered. You need to go out and do something more. You need to become an apostle. Go out and start spreading your wings a little bit. So it was the teachers that were the ones that sent Paul and Barnabas out. And Paul listened to them, right? And in Paul's list of those in the church with great gifts, right? We see that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. We see that in Ephesians chapter 4. He lists all sorts of people, right? Teachers are second on the list, only behind apostles and prophets, right? Are all apostles and prophets? No. Are all teachers? He starts listing all of them, right? Are wonder workers all that? They're above wonder workers, right? Working healings, workers of healings was less than teacher in Paul's listing. Does that mean that he's giving them priority? Who knows? He did when he wrote it. So teachers were critical and they were revered in the early church. Because of that, their ministry also came with the most inherent dangers, right? You can get a pretty big head if people are adoring you and loving you, right? And being deferential towards you, right? Everything that you say is held as gospel truth. That's a lot to have to bear and not distort the truth, distort your perspective of yourself, or make you become a monster, right? Really, a tyrant. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't, So James right now is telling everyone, don't rush to be a teacher because the way is perilous, right? It's a huge responsibility. It's a big task. And it's also setting yourself up for failure if you haven't achieved like a maturity and a dispassionate kind of humility already. So if you're doing this, if you still loved the acclaim of your fellows, your peers, that this is the worst place because you're going to be treated like a little king. And if you're not ready to not have that go to your head, it'll distort who you are, right? It'll turn you into a monster. So if the apostle is the Christian version of the prophet, the teacher is the Christian version of the rabbi, okay? And rabbis were hugely important in the Jewish faith, right? They were the predecessor to the Christian teacher. Well, the rabbi means teacher. It also literally, like we talked about in a couple weeks ago, means the great one. How do you think you would do if all day, every day, people said, "Great one, how are you? Great one." Oh, and they stand up when you walk into the room, right? That's going to inflate the ego, even the most selfless person, right? So we've got this now being attributed to the Christian early teachers. That's what James is worried about here. Um, the Jews viewed the rabbi as more a place of honor more so than your parents. Because while your parents brought you into the life of this world, the rabbis are the ones bringing you into the life of the world to come, right? So they always treated the rabbis with incredible reverence, more so than even their parents. So much so that if an invading, warring kind of nation came in and captured the city or captured the town, or if bandits came and attacked the group, it was the rabbi that was to be ransomed first. So like if bandits came into your home and I was visiting it for a house blessing, you would have to ransom to get me safe first before John, right? Before Renee, before any of them. I'd have to be ransomed first. That would have been the expectation. That would have been the expectation of the Jewish community. We need to get our teacher back, right? Okay, so there's a huge amount of respect and veneration for this position, but because of that, there's a lot of dangers that are inherent in it. To combat this spiritual pride, right? The Christian teacher must take great care to speak only the truth, not personal opinions or prejudices, but they also must practice what they preach. They can't be hypocrites. Teachers have entered into this special position by their own choice, and as a result are under greater condemnation if they fail their task, right? If they don't get it done spiritually, if they can't walk the walk themselves, God's going to look so much harder on them than on their students, right? James is demanding that they never forget that responsibility. So don't rush into being a teacher, right? Be a student for as long as you can. If I could have stayed at Holy Cross for 10 more years, I would have stayed at Holy Cross for 10 more years. Nevertheless, when it's a calling that is something that is rightly being delivered by God and being received in like the right kind of spirit, it's a beautiful walk, and I'm grateful for it. Just, stay humble, All right. And hopefully practice what you preach and stay a person of integrity, right? And conviction. So
Father, could this also be where heresy perhaps arises from in some ways?
For sure. Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Distorting the truth.
It's both of those things. So, right, the Christian, like we said, they have to do both things equally. They have to practice what they preach and be a person of integrity, but they also cannot distort the truth. They just can't, right? So, gosh, I love the gospel, but can't stand that one group of people. Let me twist the gospel just ever so slightly, or interpret it ever so slightly, maybe a little bit beyond what's appropriate to make my point clear that those people are wrong. It's a very sticky situation. Yeah. So we have to remember that I'm looking internally here, that we are a place to be teachers and ministers and pastors, and not necessarily judge, jury, and executioner, right? Like we have to make sure that that's the one role that Christ has that we are not, So, all right. Verse 2. We're going to just look at verse 2, and then we're going to take them 2 verses at a time. It's a short chapter, so we're gonna move through it pretty quickly here. So, verse 2. So talking about, let's not all race to be teachers, right? Knowing that there's going to be a stricter judgment for teachers. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. We're going to start talking about the sins of the tongue here in this chapter, and he's starting to lay down kind of the groundwork for that. All right. So James is now qualifying. It's tough to be a teacher because you have to practice what you preach, and we all fail to practice what we should. Okay, so why would any of you race to be teachers when you know that you are imperfect? Well, none of us are perfect. So someone's got to be a teacher. Just weigh that when you're making these kind of life decisions. All right, so this is the universal danger of sin that we're talking about here, that James is talking about. Teachers aren't the only sinners. We are all guilty of something. The word that James uses here, he doesn't say sin like amartia, or like we're not an amartilo, right? We're not, that's not the word he's using here. The word he uses is ptheo. That's the verb theo, which is a form of the verb diptho, which means to fall, like to trip. All right. So he's saying we all stumble, right? Right. So he's saying the word we all stumble. He's not saying sin. He's saying we're all stumbling in many things. Um, the universality, gosh, the universal nature of sin in the gospel, in the Bible, is something that we see that stretches Old Testament, New Testament, but specifically in the New Testament, we see it doubled down on. In Paul in his third chapter of his letter to the Romans, in two different places says, there is no one who is righteous, not even one. That's verse 10. And in verse 23, he says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? So no one is sinless, not even one, and all of us fall short of the glory of God. And then John, St. John the Beloved, the apostle, in his first universal letter, chapter 1, verse 8 says, if we say that we have no sin, then we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. And what was the role of the teacher? To preach the truth, right? So don't go into it thinking that you're a finished product, that you're ready to go. You're not.
Question.
Yeah.
You get sick being lonely?
Can you get sick being lonely?
Yeah, just curious.
Sure. Well, your mental health like touches everything, like heart health touches everything, right? And we see that stress again in medical, I'm no expert by any means, but in medical communities and scientific communities, they see that stress a lot of times is a precursor for lots of diseases. So if you're stressed, depressed, or sad or lonely, it could lead to health problems. It could be a factor that leads to health
I
problems.
don't know if there's like anything in the Bible or if there was, because I know I'm dealing with it too, and it just,
Mhm.
I didn't know if there was, I hate to bring it up. It just like,
Okay.
it just like,
Well, certainly. Let me say one thing on that, and then you and I can talk after
okay,
after we're done off camera.
yeah,
The one thing that I actually wrote on this when I was a senior at Holy Cross, my last year at Holy Cross, I actually wrote on this. I wrote a paper and delivered kind of like a lecture on the idea that loneliness is the root of all evil, not money,
yeah,
not greed, not whatever, but it's loneliness, or the fear of isolation, right? And we talked about this. What was the picture of hell? I sat on that side, right? Oh, no, it was in Synaxis. It wasn't here. It was in Synaxis. I was going to say that was when we were talking about the Orthodox way. We talked about the icon of hell. The icon of hell is when there is no relationship, when there is no community, right? When we're sitting and we sat with our backs to each other. We're like, yeah, there. Hell is when I don't even acknowledge that you're with me, or that I have any help in anything, or that I have no love in anything, right? I'm just by
sorry, I
myself.
didn't bring it up. Just
No,
I thought maybe there
so
was
it's a valid
something
point.
here and
Well, we see it all over the place, right?
Yeah.
The idea of like Adam and Eve, the first sin, their immediate first response to having sinned was
Yeah.
this idea of feeling shamed because they were exposed and that there was no one there to help them or bear their burden or cover them up, right?
Yeah.
They felt on an island in front of the judgment of God, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, loneliness, isolation, alienation, it's terrible.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so you can when you're lonely or isolated or whatever, it could lead you to into passions. It could also lead you into apathy. It could lead you into feeling like, well, what's the point, right? Yeah, for sure. So it can lead you one of two ways, right? Let me turn no disturbing on. Good night. Go to sleep. Thank you. No more beeps. All right. So we've all sinned. We all have some portion here. We all have skin in the game here. We're all part owners of this universal condition of sin. Even the Greek and Roman writers of antiquity would comment on the widespread problem of sin. So Thucydides once wrote, "It is the nature of man to both sin in private and in public life." And then Seneca said, "We all sin, some more grievously and some more lightly," right? So even the ancient writers, the pre-Christian writers, saw this common problem that plagued humanity. No sin, out of all of the pantheon of sins that you could commit, no sin is more easily committed than that of the tongue, right? And unfortunately, no sin, or very few, have grave consequences like misspeaking or saying hurtful things. The stakes are pretty high when it comes to the sins uttered by the mouth. Matthew chapter 12, verse 37 says, "By your words," this is Christ. Christ says this, "By your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." All right. So by the mouth. And he talked about it's not what goes into the mouth that profanes a soul, or it's what comes out, right? So again, the sin of the mouth, the sin of the tongue, is the thing that we need to keep in check, and it's the one that's hardest to keep in check. Saint Clement, no, sorry, Saint Cyril. I have to. My orange quotes are from Saint Cyril today. Saint Cyril of Alexandria wrote about this, saying, "The effective proof of a sound mind, the proof that you have a sound mind and perfect thought, is to have said nothing faulty," right? The proof that you have a good mind and good decision making is that you never say the wrong thing or something, foolish. On our tongue, and to keep our mouths closed when necessary, right? That is the ultimate sign that someone is wise, to know when to say, to know when to speak and when not to. Foolish talk should be foreign to the saints, right? Foolish talk should be foreign to the saints. That's Saint Cyril of Alexandria who said that. Saint Cyril of Alexandria. Foolish talk should be foreign to the saints. It should be a tongue that you don't know how to speak, that you are illiterate in. Think about that. I wouldn't dream to speak Japanese. I don't think I know a word in Japanese. Konnichiwa, I guess. Yeah. Okay. All right. So into that. So give me, I don't know, Ethiopian. I don't know anything in Ethiopian, right? That's how I should feel about improper speech. I wouldn't even know what sounds to make, right? Unfortunately, I'm quite fluent in improper speech, So let's try and work backwards. Let's try and devolve and unlearn a lot of these bad habits. All right. Moving on, verses 3-5 here. Let's finish the paragraph. Okay. "Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body," just that little bit in their mouth, right? "Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member, a little organ, right? And boasts great things," right? "And see how great a forest a little fire can kindle." Okay. All right. So that word member could also be translated as organ in English. All right. Small but powerful. Here we go. "The terror of the tiny tongue is nothing to make light of." James says that it's like a bit that we put into a horse's mouth, right? If we can control the horse's mouth, the horse weighs how much, right? How many more times than we? It weighs like 5 times a human being, right? Probably more. What, it's like 1,000 pounds, something like that. It's not a ton, like an elephant's a ton, so it's got to be 1,000 pounds. So it's like five like NFL players, right? So maybe 6 people, maybe 10 people, depending on how big they are. But with a little tiny bit in its mouth, with reins, you can steer it and ride it. You can master the horse, right? Saint Augustine writes about this, saying, "Note the comparison." I think this is incredible. "Note the comparison here James is taking beasts which we are able to tame. The horse does not tame itself, nor does a man. A man is needed in order to tame a horse, and in the same way, God is needed in order to tame a man. Look at that. That's super good. That's super good. So St. Augustine, right? Note that James right now is comparing us to beasts. We need to be tamed when it comes to this. It's like a raging fire. It's like an uncontrollable forest fire that we sometimes just struggle to keep up with, right? He also compares it to the rudder of a large ship, right? And I know that we kind of we went to the beach the other day and like we got stopped by the bridge. We went to Wrightsville. We got stopped by the bridge. We're like, oh wow, it's gonna be a big ship. And it was like this little ship that had like a tall flag. We're like, come on. We got a little bit frustrated that we had to wait. Like the flag would have bent, and then sprung back. Come on. It was just the flag, you know? And so we were like disappointed that we didn't see this giant yacht or whatever come through. But still, like we get so desensitized to like the size of ships because we see them. We're at port. I mean, like when you see the big freighting ships, it's enormous, right? We talk about the Titanic. The Titanic is like a small ship compared to today's cruise liners. It's unbelievable. Like there was one cruise liner, one cruise ship that is the size of the Empire State Building, just sideways. How does that work? I saw that on, who knows if it's true. I saw it come through on scrolling on the whatever social media feed. I was like, that is nuts. And that is steered by a little tiny thing, probably no bigger than this room, right? A rudder, but probably no bigger than this room, steering the size of the Empire State Building on the water against wind. The wind's blowing this way, whatever. My rudder's going to put us this way. We're going that way, right? That's incredible. That's incredible, right? Aristippus, the Greek philosopher, once said, "The conqueror of pleasure is not the man who never uses it. He is the man who uses pleasure as a rider guides a horse or a steersman directs a ship, and so directs them wherever he wishes." I think it's funny that he used the two exact same concepts, the two exact same analogies that James is using. So he's saying the person who's able to conquer any sinful desire, any pleasure, is the one who's able to navigate those waters wisely, right? Who's able to rudder, the massive ship or tame the wild beast. It's not easy, right? That's to say that I've been able to conquer pleasure or to conquer, sin. Yeah, good luck. Good luck, right? Good luck. James here, along that same line of thinking, isn't pleading for Christians to remain silent, right? He's not saying, all right, don't run to be a teacher. In fact, don't speak at all, right? It's just, there's very little to be gained out of that. False. There's so much to be gained. We need to preach the gospel. We can't share this faith without saying it, right? Evgenia, how do we relate to the gospel? When I open the gospel book, what's the word that I say, right? Sophiarthi akusomen. Am I saying diavazomen? Like, am I saying, let us read the Holy Gospel? I'm saying, wisdom arise, let us hear the Holy Gospel. How are we going to do that if we don't speak? We have to. Humankind's relationship to God is one of obedience. Aquo, and ipakuo, right? They're the same word. Aquo to hear and ipakuo are the same word. Yeah, right. To obey is to hear, right? So this idea of like our relationship with God is the one who listens to him speaking, right? Either through himself or a prophet or a preacher or a teacher, right? Or an apostle, right? And even if we're reading, like today we're reading, we're still listening. We're listening to the word of God.
Because you say, I say.
Yeah, I say to you, right? I'm saying to you, right? So the relationship that we have with God and even the relationship we have with the scripture, even if we're reading in silence, is one of us listening. So we have to remember that. All right. So we have to use our mouth. We have to use our lips. We have to use our tongue. That's what makes this so challenging, right? The Garden of Eden was there for us, but there was the danger of the tree. The tree of the fruit of knowledge, right, was in there. The same thing is here, right? If we are to spread the gospel, we have to use our lips, but there is no greater opportunity for sin than our lips, right? Our tongue is the most dangerous thing we have, yet it's the only tool we have to preach the gospel.
That's a small organ, the smaller organ can make such a big difference.
So, and this small organ can ruin lives or save them. How many people have been brought to mercy and salvation because of the tongue? And how many lives have been ruined for forever because of the tongue? Relationships gone, right? It's hard. So James is not saying be silent. We have to speak. We just have to do it wisely. All right. This is Saint Jerome. I always love Saint Jerome. I think he always comes in like with such wisdom. All right. So Saint Jerome writes on this. Jerome. Hieronymus. Yeah, thank you. So I'm always like, where do I put the syllable? Where do I put the stress, the tono, right? Hieronymus. All right. So Saint Jerome talks about this, saying, the sword kills the body, but the tongue kills the soul. The tongue knows no moderation, either great good or great evil. It's going to do one thing greatly. It's either going to be great good or it's going to be great evil, right? So it knows no moderation. It is great good when it acknowledges that Christ is God, and a great evil when it denies that. Let no one deceive himself in thinking that he has never sinned. Even if a person is perfect in all other areas, he surely has sinned with his tongue. And what is more monstrous sin than blasphemy? The worst sin that you can commit, according to St. Jerome, is blasphemy. The worst sin that you can commit is with the tongue, right? The devil did not fall because he committed murder or adultery. He fell because of his tongue. He said, quote, I will scale the heavens, above the stars I will set up my throne. I will be like the Most High. That's from Isaiah chapter 14, verse 13 and 14. Isaiah is speaking in that passage about the Babylonian king, right? These are the words of the Babylonian king, and he compares him to Lucifer. He compares him to Satan, right? So St. Jerome is saying, clearly Isaiah was talking about this person, but he was equating it to the same treachery that Lucifer planned against God. So it's a little bit of an abstract link, but still, St. Jerome said that's apt, right? The damage caused by the tongue, if used foolishly or hurtfully, can be like a forest fire. We see that at the little kind of like the tail end, the beginning, that first line of the next paragraph. This is a common picture of the time, right? In the dry season, the Jews in Jerusalem and in that whole Israel, Palestine kind of region knew what it meant, right? The dry season was a dangerous time. If one lightning crack or if one oil lamp broke and got out of hand, the whole area would be up as like a tinderbox, right? Isaiah 9, verse 18 talks about that, saying, wickedness burns like a fire, consuming briars and thorns. It kindled the thickets of the forest, right? And Zechariah 12:6 says, a blazing pot on a pile of wood is what sin is like a flaming torch among the dry sheaves, right? So they use this kind of image all over the place because it was prevalent at the time. It's an arid, dry, hot area, right? So it was prone to wild, out of control fires. No wonder why James, who again is the leader of the Church of Jerusalem, he's not someplace lush, right? He's someplace arid. He's going to use that as kind of the metaphor at hand. All right. 2 reasons why the tongue could act in this way as a forest fire. Number 1, it's wide ranging, right? A rumor started in California can reach New York in no time. I am a diehard Packer fan, as I'm sure you all are aware of now the last couple of days. And it's funny that we're saying this because I don't know if you saw the New York Jets just fired coach Robert Saleh this morning. Okay, well, there you go. Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago. Yeah, I love him. My son, it's my son's favorite player, but he's become a little bit of a whatever, just a little bit of a diva. Just like Brett Favre did, and Brett Favre was my hero. Anyway, point is, 2 years ago, Aaron Rodgers was a little bit upset with his contract. Jordan Love isn't here. His replacement's there. He understands that his time is running short. And so he's playing hardball and he's being courted by all sorts of NFL teams. The New York Jets are the team that ended up landing him, right? When it was realized that the New York Jets head coach, owner, general manager, and their whole entourage got on a plane bound for California, where he lived, to go and court him to be the New York Jets quarterback, the news spread and was publicized before their plane landed. Before their plane landed in California, everyone knew that the New York Jets were the possible landing spot, that this is the place that Aaron Rodgers had picked. They had their meeting. By the time they got back in the air, before they landed back in New York, it was made known. Like everyone knew the details of the contract. They knew where he was going. They started talking about the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl. Like it was all this stuff before the plane. The plane. We're not even talking about like walking or running or riding a horse. The time it takes for a plane to cross the country, word had already spread and back, right? Word had spread and commentaries had been coming out, right? A full like news, 3 full news cycles happened before the plane landed, you know? So it's like flight trackers of where they were and like it's crazy. Word spreads so fast. So the tongue, like a wildfire, is wide ranging, okay? Jewish rabbis used this common picture. It was kind of like almost like a visual parable that they would say all the time. Life and death are in the hand of the tongue. Life and death are in the hand of the tongue. The tongue is holding life and death. Has the tongue a hand? No. But as a hand can kill, so can the tongue. The hand kills only at close quarters, but the tongue is called an arrow because it kills at a distance, right? Yet even an arrow can only kill at 40 or 50 paces, but the tongue ranges over the whole earth and even reaches to heaven. I mean, think about it. We pray to God. God listens to our tongue, right? So it is widespreading. Your tongue is hooked up to the biggest amplifier known in the cosmos. And we're going to talk about the word cosmos here in a little bit. He uses that in this chapter. So we have to understand that. Like, there is no whisper, right? There is no whisper. Anything that we say, even in a whisper, can be shared with someone else out of context. You got to be careful, right? There is no controlled burn here, right? It is widespread. All right, so that's number one. Number two, the other reason why the tongue can be equipped or can be likened, equated to a forest fire, is that it's uncontrollable, right? Like we just said, there's no controlled burn. Here we go. The tinder dry conditions posed a great threat to the ancient Israel. Well, so too does the tongue pose that same threat to us today. There was an ancient saying, only 3 things do not come back. Only 3 things do not come back. A spent arrow, a spoken word, and a missed opportunity, right? A spent arrow, you're never going to get that in battle. You're never getting that back, right? There was actually a funny Saturday Night Live bit where Jeremy Renner, the guy that plays Hawkeye, was like doing a skit with like the Avengers. And he was like, all right, guys, I'm out of arrows. See you guys back at the ship. And they're like, what do you mean? There's thousands of aliens. And he's like, yeah, and I had 11 arrows and I killed 11 aliens. He's like, you can't go and get them. He's like, I'll see you guys back in the ship. I thought that was so funny. Yeah. So a spent arrow, you can't go back and get it. It's done. And even if you do find it, it's probably not worthy to fire again, you know? And a lost opportunity, we know that we can never get our time back. All right, well, those 2 things make sense that they'll never come back. But the thing I say, really, I can't get a receipt on that? I can't return that? Can't, right? There is nothing harder to do than to kill a rumor. You just can't. Before we speak, let us remember that once a word is spoken, it's gone out of our control. Whoever hears that can take it and run and do whatever they want with what we just said. All right.
It's like it's a toothpaste.
Yeah, you can't get it back in the tube. You can't get it back in the tube. You can't get it back in the tube. That's right. That's right. Saint Pachomius said, "The barbarian tongue fools the whole body and is gangrene to the soul." It's like decay, going septic. Ugh, gosh. All right. The tongue, okay, right here. We said the tongue is the whole world, right? Right? Did we read? No, we need to read. We need to read. We haven't read 6. Yeah, let's go. Let's go to verses 6 through 8. Okay. All right. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. That probably should be the world of iniquity. It was written in the nominative case, right? We'll talk about that, right? It's o cosmos tis adikias, right? So it's not a world, it is the world of iniquity. Like that is the world, right? All right, so the tongue is a fire, a world or the world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature and is set on fire by hell. Every kind of beast and bird and reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Okay, let's pause. Let's talk about that. The tongue is, like we just said, the world of iniquity, not a world, the world of iniquity. O cosmos tis adikias. Cosmos means world, right? Like cosmic, right? Means world. We know that, and it is certainly being used that way. It is being used that way. It's almost only used that way. There is another really seldomly used definition of the word, though, or application of the word. It could also mean adornment, like the thing decorating, the thing that is like the final touches, right? The crowning achievement, right? So sometimes it could be used that way. It's probably not being used that way here. But if we were to read it that way, it actually is a pretty provocative kind of idea. If that's the case, okay, so originally it came from the word comiso, which means to possess, to carry, or to gain back with interest, right? Like comiso, I've got this. But when I hand it to you, next time I get it back, I'm hoping to get 2 of those, right? So it's this idea of like, I am now gaining this and crowning it, and like, it's now a finishing touch. It's like my gains, right? Okay. So if comiso was really the root word that led to cosmos, that would explain why there's this kind of like alternative like perspective and kind of like angle that you could see in the word. If we then apply that to this verse, it could then mean that the tongue is the owner, the carrier of sin, right? Where do you hold sin? You hold it like this is the thing that's carrying it. This is the thing that's possessing the sin. This is the adornment. The tongue is the adornment of sin. It is you like people who have earrings. That's like you putting sin on your body is the tongue. The tongue is you clamping sin to your body, right? It is the owner of sin and the agent that carries it favorably or adorns it to look pleasing and attractive to us, right? Gossip is fun, right? That scandalous word is exciting to say and to hear, right? So this idea of like adornment, yeah, it could mean that. Again, it probably doesn't mean that in this sense. It is the whole world, the entirety of sin is in the tongue. But still, an interesting way to like, it's like the 4th definition for the word, and it's like very rarely used. But even if you apply it here, it's kind of cool, right? Unlikely, but compelling way to see it. When used in a negative sense, cosmos, again, the idea of world, means the world without God, not God's creation, like the rebels against him, right? Those in the world who oppose or are hostile to God, okay? This would suggest that while the heart and the soul, the cardia, the psyche, right? While that is the natural place where God lives, the tongue is the world where he does not. It is the habitation that does not ever make room for God. Saint Basil said, if you love life, fulfill the commandment of life. The one who loves me, said Jesus, is the one who keeps my commandments. That's John chapter 14, verse 21. The one who loves me is the one who keeps my commandments. And the first commandment, 2 verses later in verse 23, he goes on to say, and the first commandment is to keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking guile, right? So we know that the great commandment is to love God with your whole being and to love your neighbor as yourself. But in John chapter 14, Christ is saying, if the person loves me, he'll keep my commandments. And what is the commandment? The first one that he says is to speak no evil. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking guile. That's what Christ said first, off the top of his mind. What is that? It's this. Right? So Saint Basil continues saying, for from the tongue come slanders, coarse jokes, idiocies, irrelevant accusations, bitterness, swearing, false witness. The tongue is the creator of all these evil things and more. Okay. All right. That's that. The cosmos adikias. Now, the next thing that we were going to look at is the course of nature, right? You see that here? The course of nature in verse 6. It sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell, okay? That is tontrochon tis genoseos, like Genesis, genoseos, right? The birth, the Genesis, right? So it doesn't mean the course of nature. It literally means tontrochon is like a wheel, the wheel of being, the wheel of being. That's what this means. So the course of nature, let's dive into what that is. It's literally the wheel, the spinning wheel of being. Wheels were understood in 4 different contexts and used poetically in ancient literature for 4 different gains. 1, a wheel is a circle. Got it. No beginning, no end. It's constant. It's always moving. It's always moving, right? There's no beginning. There's no end. There's also nothing missing, right? You can't have 2 parts of a wheel with missing chunks. That doesn't work, right? We just got rid of a luggage that had a chunk of a wheel missing in our suitcase, and every time we'd roll it, it'd be right. It's constantly like thump, 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 thump. It's the worst. I felt so bad running through JFK. Thump, 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 thump. Like it's just awful. It was so bad. So we finally pitched it like yesterday, 2 days ago. It's been I'm not going to buy another suitcase. We finally bought more suitcases. I was so cheap. I was so cheap, and I finally listened to President. I was like, yeah, you're right. That was not good. It was not good. So it's a circle, right? There's no end, there's no beginning. There's also nothing missing in it, right? It is whole. 2, a circle, all points on the circle, right? All points on the circle are either moving up or down at all times, right? This point is either moving up, but now it's starting to move down, right? So it's the ups and downs of life, right? The cycle of nature, the cycle of being, cycle of life is peaks and valleys. It's good days and bad days, always, right? So the ancient world always saw their life kind of like as a fixed point on a wheel that was just, today was good, oh, now it rained. Today was great, I got a promotion, oh, I got fired. Like it was just, it's constantly, you're either going up or you're in decline, right? Number 3, it's always turning back on itself, right? It's not, yay, I finally made it here. No, you're going back, right? It's this merry-go-round. It's constantly going, okay? So it's cyclical. It's repetition of life, right? It's fall, then it's spring, or it's fall, then winter, then spring, then summer, then fall, then winter, then spring, then summer, right? It's the same beats over and over again. 4, the ancient world had lots of different pagan religions and lots of like astrological religions, right? They worship the stars and all kinds of things. Once a bunch of different religions were categorized as the Orphic religions back in the day. And those were based off of reincarnation, right? This idea. So a lot of the ancients kind of believe that this is like your 1,000th life that you've lived, right? And you're just, when you die, you're going to be someone else. And when they die, right, you're just going to keep doing this. For those people, that was an insufferable treadmill. And the point of life was to break free of that and enter into eternity, right? Out of this like mortal coil of just constantly spinning, right? So the ancient world had this idea of a wheel being something incredibly frustrating because it was the like weary, sorrowful wheel, right? And they would say that the Orphics, these ancient kind of pagans, would say, "I hope to fly out of this sorrowful, weary wheel, this wearied wheel," right? So James is speaking here, using a very common at the time phrasing to make his point, to deliver his point. This idea of a wheel being something that was very frustrating, you know.
Yeah, Father, before James had made the point that God has no shadow of turning.
Mhm.
So I found that interesting.
Yep,
Right?
yep. He did
God
that
is-
last week. We talked about that, right?
Wheel. right?
Yeah. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago? That was in chapter 1.
Let's see. Maybe chapter 1.
I think it was chapter
Yeah,
1. It was chapter 1. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because we talked about how like even the suns and moons have, you know, orbits and things like that. Like even the stars in heaven have some kind of movement to them. Or like the moon is like this, and then it's like this, and then it's like this, and then it's like this, right? There's no constancy there. The shadow is always changing, but the truth is not, right? God is constant. So again, the wheel is something that is frustrating because it is constant futility, right? Not constant blessedness, right? It is constant up and down, up and down, up and down. Fall, like winter then summer, like harvest then working, harvest then barren, harvest then, you know, drought, right? Yeah, that's terrible. That's that's torturous, right? And you don't have to look any farther than the icon of St. Catherine right there on the wall. She was tortured on a wheel of like affliction right there. So yeah, the wheel was not a good thing, right? In another world, Christ probably could have been killed on a wheel like that, right? Like that was an instrument of death, right? An instrument of pain for the early world. All right. 7 verses 7 and 8. Did we read that yet? Yeah, right. Yeah. So the last thing I'll say before we go on to verse 9 here, my last little note. Beyond all taming, he says here in verses 7 and 8. But no man can tame the tongue, right? It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Beyond all taming. Ancient Romans had tame animals. They had pets. They had domesticated animals. In big residences or big like commercial public gathering places, in the atrium, they always had ponds with fish in it. So they had domesticated, like tamed fish that knew that they had to be fed. They didn't know how to hunt or whatever. You know, they're how I am of the idea that you have to be able to pet a pet. So like, is a fish a pet? I don't know. But they've domesticated these fish, right? So the ancient Romans had tamed fish in urban and residential environments. Again, in these atriums of these prominent buildings. They also prayed to the pagan god of medicine. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this. Asclepius, Aesculpius, right? Asclepius, whose symbol was the serpent, right? That's why we have two reasons. It's also because Moses and Aaron, the serpent, right, on the staff when they were being bitten by the deadly asps, the deadly vipers in Exodus, they looked at the staff and then they were healed. That's why we have that as the symbol for on our ambulances and paramedics, right? But it's also this. There was the snake was always kind of used with this idea of medicine because the venom is used to make anti-venom to like heal the person who has been bitten by this serpent, right? Well, the ancient Romans always attributed the snake to this pagan god of medicine. And in the temples that were dedicated to him, the people who were ill or infirmed would go and hold vigil in the temples and they would fall asleep in the temples. And the snakes are just in the temples. They would just have them slithering about these temples. And if while you were there sitting or laying or sleeping or whatever, if a snake glided over your body, right, like came over you, I'd scream and run out the door, right? But for them, that was the sign that God's hand had touched you, that Asclepius like actually was going to grant you healing. Get them away from me. Like I'll take my chances with Advil, you know, like get out of here. No, thank you. So like the domesticated fish, the domesticated reptiles, and like that's why he's using these. He's not talking about dogs and cats. He's talking about even lesser creatures, like mindless creatures, like venomous creatures, right? That's what he's saying. This deadly poison. He's using this kind of concept. God bless you.
Thank you.
Because this is what the people would have seen. And the Jews would have seen that and thought that that was crazy. They'd be like, that is ridiculous. And then you'd be like, well, you did that with, Exodus. You did that with the rod, right? While we've been able to do this with animals, no man has been able to tame the tongue. Saint John Chrysostom said, the tongue is a piercing sword, but let us not wound others with it. Rather, let us use it to cut off our own infections, right? All right. Let's read verses 9 through 12. 9 through 12. With it, with the tongue, we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening, or fresh and salt, right? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus, no spring yields both salt water and fresh. All right. That's something to be thankful, be contemplative of, to be mindful of, right? We got to think about that, right? We use our lips to praise God here on Sundays. How do we use them? How do we use them afterwards? How do we use them when we leave? How do we use them in coffee hour, right? Not even when we leave. We're still in the same address. Are we using our lips the right way, like we just were? James says, with the tongue we bless God, totally common for the Jew. Whenever God was mentioned to a Jew, he or she would respond, blessed be he, right? So if you said, Jesus Christ, be like, blessed be he. Like I'd interject, be like, no, we're not using your name in vain, right? 3 times a day, listen to this, you're going to love this. 3 times a day, the Jewish faithful had to repeat the Shemona Ezra, right? Which is a famous set of 18 prayers called eulogies. Listen to this. You're going to like this. Which all begin with, blessed are you, O God. Do we do that? We sure do. We sure do. For the memorial services, but even in Orthros, when we're here, we have a set. Right? Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your commandments. We have the whole set of petitions that start with that little sticky, that little verse that precedes it. We are continuing that practice today. Our practice of the Evangelitaria today is this Jewish prayer that they would do 3 times a day. These set verses that all began with that first opening line. Blessed is our God. Blessed be you, our God, right? And yet, our mouths, which had previously been blessing God, are now cursing our neighbors, right? Think of what Chrysostom said during Lent. What use is it to refrain from eating the meat of animals when we're devouring our brothers and sisters in gossip, right? Why are we fasting during Lent when we're going to consume our brothers and sisters? This fickle nature shows up even in the apostles. Peter, Matthew chapter 26, verse 35. Peter says, even though I must die with you, I will never deny you. That didn't work out well for him, right? Remember what he did before the cock crowed 3 times. And then John said in 1 John 3:18, right? In his universal letter, his first universal letter, he said, little children, he's talking to the people, right? Little children, let us not love in word and speech, but in action and truth. He said that, right? That's beautiful. But he was also the disciple who asked Christ to rain down fire upon a Samaritan village who didn't show hospitality to them when they were traveling in Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, he said, call down from heaven, from your Father, and rain down fire on that village that didn't receive us when we were traveling. All right, so the disciples showed that there was blessings and cursings coming from the same mouths. Right? It's not unheard of for someone to speak with piety on Sunday and then curse their employees out on Monday, or be the beacon of piety to the people out in the neighborhood and then come home and scream at their kids, right? It's not unheard of. We see that all too often, right? Some drugs are both poisons and cures. Just like the venom of snakes make antivenom, right? So there's a reason why he's using these images. All right. I said that this was a light chapter, but we are taking our time with this. My goodness, we got to pick up the pace. Here we go. Here we go. We got to pick up the pace. Let's read this whole section and then talk about it at once. All right. Verse 13 here through the end. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. All right. The one who ought to never be a teacher, the wrong kind of wisdom, the true wisdom. That's what this little section is broken down in. Let's try and do this as efficiently as we can right here, because I've got a lot of notes still. Okay, bitter envy and self-seeking. Both of the original Greek words were not inherently bad, right? So the first word, envy, zelos, right? Zelos means to have warmth of feeling for or against, to be a zealot, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? This could be the desire to emulate a good example, or to be envious of something else, right? And to be jealous and to be consumed by it, right? Yeah, envious, right? So it could be good, but it could be bad. In fact, it's derived from the root verb zeo, to boil, right? And we have every Sunday, you don't get communion cold, right? We put hot water, we put boiling water into the chalice. So that way it's got some fervor to it, it's got some zeal to it. One day you'll find out, and that's really nice, right? If you ever have cold communion touch your lips, it's terrible, right? You'll spew it from your mouth, like what Chris said. Be warm, be cold, don't be lukewarm, right? So there's got to be a life to it, right? So we put like hot water in the chalice right before it goes out, so that everyone has a little bit of like an active kind of experience. Zeo, to boil, and zelos is a word, a term that's omamopoic, poet. I'm like all tongue-tied today. Omamopoic, right? Which means that it mimics the sounds of like the thing that it's trying to say. So this word is like the sound of water that's bubbling over from heat, right? Because it means to boil over, right? The idea of like silos, the sizzle, right? The boil to the sizzle, right? And then the second word here used, self-seeking, is erithia, right? Which means ambition. That could be good or bad, right? Originally, it was used to describe women who were hired to serve in a household. They're like seamstresses. They were spinning women, right? That's not a bad thing. Well, then over time, it devolved into those who are looking to get paid for daily work. That's not necessarily a bad thing either. Then over time, it became someone who's a mercenary for hire, right? I'm just doing it for the money. I don't care what it is. You give me like dirty deeds done dirt cheap, like just give me like AC/DC. You give me a job. I don't care. It's just the money that I care about. All right, now we're getting into something that's bad, right? This is not good. This is no longer good. It didn't stop there. Now it's devolved into selfish ambition, which is used politically, right? I don't care what it is. Just get me elected, right? Now it's become gross, so it originally wasn't a bad word, and it devolved over time. One of the most difficult things in the world to do is to argue with passion while not hurting someone else, right? To be utterly convinced of your own beliefs without being bitter to the others who think differently. This is a requirement of Christian teachers and scholars. We have to be able to do that. We have to preach to those who don't know the gospel with love for the person we're preaching to. We just have to figure that out. Wrong teaching can't do this. People who are not good teachers, who are false teachers, they can't do this. It's impossible. According to James, those wrong teachers here, as he intimates in this little paragraph, had four characteristics. They're fanatical, right? They base their arguments on emotion rather than reasoned conviction. They're bitter, right? The opponents are their enemies. They're not the loving people that they're trying to preach and persuade gently into coming and accepting the good news, right? They're selfishly ambitious, right? They're the wrong kind of iditheia, right? They're the wrong kind of that. They're more eager to boast than to share the truth, right? I'm the teacher. It doesn't matter what I'm teaching. I'm the teacher, right? Gosh, that's not good. If I ever start getting excited, like, yeah, I'm the priest. Oh, wait, what was the thing I was preaching? That's not good, right? And then 4, they're arrogant. It's the pride of having knowledge rather than the joy of sharing it with others, right? That's terrible. All right, so that's the wrong teacher. Now let's talk about the wrong wisdom, right? It's earthly, sensual, and demonic, okay? This kind of teaching can only measure success in worldly terms and for worldly purposes, right? It's fitting for lower creatures and not the dignity of mankind. It's not from God. The most notable thing is that this kind of propaganda produces disorder, which is a characteristic foreign to God. We just talked about not speaking in the tongue of evil speech, like that should be a foreign tongue to us. Well, disorder is a foreign tongue to God. God, the great creator, created with order and beauty, and things work and seasons, and there's an appropriate time for everything, an appropriate blooming season for everything, right? There's beauty there. Well, not good teaching. You good to go down the steps? All right. A false teacher is producing disorder, producing a fragmented kind of congregation, one that looks to hurt each other. It's devilish, right? That doesn't come from God, okay? Chrysostom says, let us cleanse the eyes of our souls of all filth, for just as filth and mud blind the eyes of the flesh, so too worldly concerns and discussions about money making can dull the hearing of our minds more effectively than any filth. Selfish ambition can dull us more than any filth, and not only corrupt them, but do more wicked things than these as well, right? So if we're worried about selfish ambition, it could lead us to compromise other virtues that we have. All right, now, last little section. The bad preacher, the bad teacher, the bad wisdom, the false wisdom. Let's talk about the true wisdom. He finishes on a good note here, a positive note. The Jewish sages always agreed that true wisdom came from above as a gift from God, not a result of human achievement. It's a gift from God. So there you go. We're not talking about works versus faith. He's talking about gifts from God, right? The wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 25. The breath and power of God and a pure emanation of the glory of Almighty. Right? That's wisdom. Wisdom is the breath and power of God and the pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty, right? It's his crown and it's his power and it comes from him. It's not from us. James uses 8 words to describe this wisdom. 1, it's pure, agni, right? Pure enough to approach God. True wisdom is so cleansed of all ulterior motives that it is pure enough to see God. While worldly wisdom wants to escape God's sight, true wisdom is able to bear his scrutiny. If you have wisdom, God will examine, be like, yeah, there's nothing faulty there. Come in, right? You preached without any kind of like lie there. 2, it's peaceable, right? Iriniki. It's full of peace. We talked about this in many sections, both this year, last year, previous years. Peace, irini, means it's the Greek word for the Jewish word shalom, which means wholeness with God, unity with God and with each other. So it's right relationships with the body of Christ, both him as our head and all of our members. Okay, so the true wisdom is something that's pure. It's something that brings wholeness, brings peace, right? It is 3, gentle, right? And that word is epikis, right? There's no translation that really works in English for this word. Aristotle defined it as that which is just beyond the written law. Like the written law is good, but it's something that's beyond it, and we don't know what it is, right? And as justice better than justice. That's what Aristotle called this word. It is how to apply the law and how to forgive. The English poet Matthew Arnold called it sweet reasonableness, right? Sweet being reasonable-minded, and the ability to extend the same kindly consideration to others that we want to receive ourselves. So it's knowing the law, but then also knowing how to like apply it with like sensitivity to people who maybe need some consideration, right? All right. So that's three, right? Number four, willing to yield, right? FP right? FP. That's ready to obey God, whatever and whenever his voice says, right? Whenever he says something, and no matter what his voice says, it's being ready to obey God. It can also mean easy to persuade. That doesn't mean gullible. That doesn't mean naive. That means you're willing to listen to like the appeal, right? So the judge, the true teacher of wisdom, knows what's true, but I'm willing to hear what you had to say. Like, tell me why you were speeding. Tell me, oh, your wife was giving birth. Oh, got it. Yeah, right on your way, right? It's the willingness to, right, I know what's true, but where's your starting point? Why were you not here at the truth? It's kindness. It's yeah. So there's no like one set word for this. Because again, in the ancient world, this didn't exist. Like this was not a thing. It was justice, you know. There was no mercy. 5, full of mercy. How funny is that? Full of mercy, and 6, good fruits. Those two things kind of go together. Full of mercy and good fruits. Misthi eleus ke karpon agathon, right? So mercy coming from the root word of oil, which means something that is poured out over an entire surface and penetrates it and perfects it without any blemish or wound in it, right? Oil was used as a medicinal kind of ointment, like a healing thing. And if you like pour it on a pan, you'll notice that there's no like crack or dimple or seam in it. It just completely perfectly mirrors the surface of the pan. That's how God pours his mercy on us, right? Perfect. All right, 2 more. Without partiality and without hypocrisy. So adiaritos, gosh, oh my gosh, my tongue. What's my tongue doing today? How fitting, right? We're talking about the tongue. Yeah, right. Adriakritos, right? So without partiality, so not wavering, not swaying. Think about the opposite of what we talked about last week, right? When we talked about the person that like sways and kind of like is debating between two different outcomes. It knows its way, it chooses its path, and it abides in it. It doesn't steer from it. And then without hypocrisy, anhypokritos, which literally means like unhypocrite, yeah, without hypocrisy, anapokritos. It does not deal in deception, but it is honest. It does not pretend to be what it is not or act a certain way to gain its own ends. Okay. James concludes by saying that this is the fruit of righteousness, and it is sown by those who practice and make peace, right? Right? It is the fruit of righteousness that is sown in peace by those who make peace. All right. So wisdom is the seed, the fruit of righteousness that is sown in peace by those who make peace. The seed that brings rich harvest, this rich harvest of wisdom, of true wisdom, can never flourish in any atmosphere other than one of right relationships with others and God, right? It just can't. It can't thrive in a place where you and I love each other, but we hate each other, or where you two are in cahoots against the three of us. It can't. True wisdom can't exist in that environment, right? So it is the product, the harvest, right, of peace sown by those who make peace, okay? Furthermore, only those living in such relationships can sow these seeds and reap the rewards. St. Augustine gives us the last kind of concluding thought about this, saying, this is the wisdom which tames the tongue. We just talked about nothing can tame the tongue. This wisdom can. This wisdom can, because it's a gift from God. This wisdom can tame the tongue. It descends from above, not springing from human hearts. Would anyone dare snatch it away from the grace of God and in overweening pride place it in the power of man? Not so. This wisdom comes from God alone. And this is the only thing that can be the rudder that guides the course of our lives, right? And actually controls this unquenchable, raging forest fire that exists in our mouth. All right. Good job. There was a lot there. I can't believe we went so long. When I was writing this, I was like, gosh, this is such a light chapter. But appreciate you guys being here and sticking through. We appreciate you all being here. We'll see you next week for chapter 4 and one more week of James, and then we switch to the letters of Peter. Okay. For the prayers of the Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, your God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Amen, you guys. See you guys.